Welcome back. This next fly we're going to be doing is back to an original pattern. This is another articulated streamer. This one is called Miss October, and it's more of a jig style pattern. It's got some dumbbell eyes on the front of it, which I'm going to go ahead and grab right now before we get tying. I do this one in a few different colors. Mainly white, olive, and black are the three main ones. Every once in a while I'll throw a tan in there. I haven't really fished the tan too much, but overall this pattern's a good pattern. It has good motion. It's produced well, so we'll get right to it. To start, same as most of my patterns, we're going to go with the Daiichi 2461 size 2 in the back hook, gel spun thread, get my mark right where I want it at the point where the barb starts to go up. For the tail, we're going to use some ice wing fiber in black. This is something a little bit different. I don't typically use materials like this too much for a tail, but we do something a little bit different that I'll show you once we get a little bit further along. Kind of gives the motion back that this doesn't have a ton of motion, but it does have some good flash. Just has a pretty good look overall, but like I said, I typically don't use flash material solely for a tail. I usually supplement it with the flash, but this one, like I said, it's a little bit different than the rest of them. So we're going to just take this in, measure it out a little bit longer than the shank of your hook, and just fold it back over itself. And you can kind of just run your scissors through this. Don't make it a good clean cut, but if you just keep your scissors open and kind of pick at it a little bit, it'll give you the look that you're going for. You don't want a nice straight line, straight cut on that tail. Something along those lines is what you're looking at. To finish off our tail, what we're going to do is take a piece of black blood quill marabou, and all we're going to do with this is we're going to palmer it, or this spay style. You'll see a lot of spay flies tied like this, but we're just going to use this one plume, and I like to tie mine in from the thicker end instead of the tips. This way I know right about where I want to stop. If you watched the last video on the sex dungeon, I explained about how to figure out your starting points for when you're tying in schlopping. Well, the same applies for this. You want to find a spot where it's not real rigid. See how it kind of bends pretty easy right there? That's a good spot to tie in at. And this whole thing's actually not too bad. You could tie in anywhere on this, but some plumes that you get will be extremely rigid, and the stems will split and just cause all sorts of chaos when you're trying to get these tied in. Now just kind of advance your thread a little bit. I don't know, third of the way, halfway, it doesn't really matter, and then you just toss in a quick half hitch. And then we'll bring our thread into the cradle. Let me find my hackle pliers here and get as far up as you can without losing these. Sometimes if you get too thin up at the top, when you clamp in your, let's come out just a little bit, when you clamp in your hackle pliers, if you get way up to the top sometimes you'll lose a little bit and it'll slip out on you. Don't worry about making these wraps really tight. Just kind of advance your plume all the way to the, as far as it'll go. Like I said, you don't have to worry about these being real tight. Just kind of nice, evenly spaced all the way until you run out of room. Now what we'll do is we'll just peel all of this back. Oh boy. Hey! Something must be pretty serious out there. Just kind of peel all that back, and you can see how it gives that nice spay effect. And what you wind up with is a tail that'll give you a little bit of motion, but it still has more than enough flash in the center. It's just kind of neat little variation on marabou tails. Next up on this, we're going to take our wire that's going to hold down the schlappen that we use for bulk to fill our body out just a little bit. Tie in your wire, and we'll hook this little tab around. Create a loop for your dubbing, and then open loop this to the front. Grab my tool here. Get in the cradle. For our body, we're going to go with just some ice dub black. It's what we got is called Bloody Black. It's kind of neat. It has a little red and green in it. If you want to go straight black or peacock, whichever color you choose. This just happened to be the one that I grabbed. There's nothing specific to this fly that it has to be this color or that, so whatever you pick will work. And then we'll lay this down on the table real quick. I know you can't see it. I'm just building my taper for the dubbing. Get this in our loop. Spin the loop. Zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to give this one more spin. This way you guys can see what I'm doing to get this to act how I want. Kind of just pick this stuff out a little bit, make sure your taper looks good, and then advance this right to the front. There we go. We can tie off your loop. We're going to find black schlappen feather that looks pretty good. I'll find one here. Those are all pretty short. This one will work. I like this one. And then we'll go ahead and get the front hook as well, because we're going to wind up doing 2 schlappen feathers on this. Go ahead and find your point on the feather that you want to tie this in at. See, that's nice and flexible. So we can go ahead and just peel all of this excess off. Trim that, and then we'll tie this in. Half hitch, bring the cradle back around. And these ones, these are I think 4 to 6 inch, 4.5 to 6 inch on this Nature Spirit. These Ones up here, I believe they go 5 to 7. The 4 to 6 on the bigger articulated streamers, you gotta watch sometimes, especially if you're tying, anything about above a size 1 typically, or above a size 1, can wind up running a little bit short if you don't pick the longest feathers in there. We'll just kind of pick these out a little bit, so when we run our wire, we trap as little as possible. Go the opposite direction that you wrapped your slopping, and just run this forward. Tie off your wire. Didn't look like we trapped a whole awful lot there. Maybe a few on this side. Just kind of pick them out. I'm not even going to worry about taking the bodkin through it. They look pretty good. Sounds like the dog's down there grabbing a drink. I swear that thing's the loudest dog ever when it comes to drinking water. Let me see. Next up, we're going to find... And this is an old neck that I've had laying around for years. I really don't tie a whole lot with black necks, but I have found a use for them here lately. And all I'm going to do is find 2 stems that are pretty close to the same size. Just pluck both of those out, and there we go. And then what I'm going to do is just line these up down the side, and I want them sticking just slightly past my tail. You can see right there, it's going just a little bit past the tail. So all I'm going to do now is have that measured where I want it. And then one trick I'll show you real quick. These stems tend to be rounded, and when you go to tie them on, they kind of want to spin around sometimes, and you can't get them to lay exactly flat how you would like them. So just take the back end of your scissors, this portion right here, they're nice and flat, and you can just go ahead and flatten this out. You can either pull it through like that, or just kind of tap it, and it will flatten it out so you have a nice flat surface to tie up against your hook. Get a couple loose wraps, and then tighten it down. Hey! Everything's a toy to her. Everything's a toy. And we're going to grab our second hackle and just throw this one on as well. Strip off all of your excess, and then same thing, just kind of flatten this out. They're not perfectly rounded, but they just seem to go onto the hook a lot better when you do this. They won't rotate as much, and they seem to stick where you want them a lot better. I'll just get that measured out. And like I said, just 1 or 2 loose wraps, advance it to the back, and then you can pinch it down, and you can see those are lining up real nice for us. Right down the center of the fly. Maybe a little bit up, but there we go. We're going to finish off this back hook with another piece of marabou. excess, tie in the stem. Take a little bit more off of that. Really, all you're looking for is about 2 to 3 turns on this, just enough to get you a little bit of bulk, a little bit of movement, and that's it. We can tie this off. And then I'll just wrap this one manually because we're kind of out of real estate. Peel everything back. Go as close as you can to the eye of your hook because we're going to peel this stuff back and get it out of our way just a little bit. If you wind up going, not going close enough to the eye, what you'll wind up with is like a quarter inch, because you're going to tie back over top of this. You'll wind up with like a 1/4 inch or so of just wasted hook space, and it kind of can be a little tricky to cover up with the material from the front hook. This looks pretty good right there. See how it just gives a little bit more bulk, a little bit more motion. Fly kind of feels out a little bit that way. I'll reach back. Get ready to tie this off and color it up. Touch this up with our black Prismacolor. And there you have the back end of our fly. Pull this out of the vise, set it to the side for the time being. And we're going to advance up to a 2461 size 1. Same as always. I'm going to grab my nylon thread. And then pretty much from here on out, when I do these videos that have dumbbell eyes on them, I'm just gonna jump right. I'm gonna have everything pre-tied, that way you don't have to constantly watch this over and over. But for anybody who missed the last one, we'll get this thrown on here real quick. So you just want to figure 8 over your eyes and then wrap around the thread base that you just made. Rotate your eyes to the bottom, off center just a little bit, and then throw a dab of zap on the top here. It'll run down to the bottom. Just a little bit of zap does the trick. Make sure that we look lined up as good as possible. That looks good. Figure 8 over the top. And then you can pull decently tight with this nylon 6/0 that I'm using. But once I throw the GSP on there, that's when I'll really wrench down, and the zap's not going to be kicked all the way just yet to where it's set. So I mean, I'll still be able to get some wraps with that GSP around it. And we'll back that off just a touch. Grab another bead. This one looks like a winner. Throw your bead through your wire. Grab your back hook, go through the top of the hook, and then back through your bead. Get your distance about where you want it, and then a lot of times I'll just take, and once I know my distances are good, I'll just take and pull my hook back so it kind of kinks the articulation wire. That way if it does move around or anything slides on me, then I have You know, I don't have to remeasure. I already have a reference point as to where I want my wire to be. Go through. Now we're done with our nylon thread. And like I said, we're probably just about to the point where that zap wants to set. It's still a little bit tacky, so we're good. And then all I do is just come back over with the GSP, and this really just locks your eyes into place, because you can pull pretty good on these things and not have to worry about it moving around on you. Those eyes are locked, we're set. I'm gonna grab my straw here and get this stuff out of the way. Alright, this is going to mirror the back half of the fly as well. We're going to find a good wispy marabou plume. This is a little more rigid than I like it, but I think we'll be able to work with it. A quick half hitch. There we are. Now, throw your hackle pliers on here and just right around, just like on the back hook. Don't worry about your spacing. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's no set spot it has to be at, and then just when you're ready to tie it off, it'll go ahead and fall apart on you. Try this again. Back to the bobbin cradle with you. Alright, take two. And I'm starting to trap a little bit there. There we go. Every once in a while you have to pull these out and just kind of manipulate them by hand, because it will have a tendency to trap a few. Especially, I grabbed a little bit more than I typically do on the tips of this, so a lot of it wasn't free. As free as it should be. I'll just kind of pull all of this back and then run our thread right over top it. Just open loop it, and there we go. We have a nice cover for our connection and a little bit of bulk that will marry in to the back hook, the front marabou stack that we put on. We got our half hitch, we got our dubbing loop ready, and I forgot a step. I'll just go. Forgot to put in the wire. Not a big deal. Like I said in the last video, you can tie these hackle stems, whether it's saddle or slobbin, whichever you decide to use. You can tie them in by the tips right here and then just run them forward if you want. But I think this saves a little bit of longevity to your flies with the wire in. It keeps the tooth from getting in there and ripping it up and unraveling your hackle. So I just prefer to do it this way. It's an extra step. It takes a little bit longer, but your flies seem to last longer, and I like the look of it a little bit more as well. I'm jumping the gun here. Jumping the gun. It's not time for that yet. We don't even have a body. I'm getting ahead of myself. Take our dubbing out. Form your wedge. This looks like it's going to be a little thick at the front, but we'll be able to fix that. Give it another quick spin. It was a little thick at the front. I'll just kind of pull this down and even it out. It's the nice thing about working with a dubbing loop. You're able to manipulate the dubbing as it's in the loop before you spin it on. Get your taper right and everything where you want it. Now, back to the step I was trying to jump to earlier. You want to keep nice even tension on this. Don't pull too hard on it. Just keep your tension, work your way to the back, and then when you get back there, just kind of fluff all of this stuff out, especially with the saddle hackle will kind of work itself out. The schlappen tends to, because it's a little webbier, it tends to stick together a little bit more, so you definitely want to make sure that you run your fingers through there, just kind of open everything up a little bit so you don't trap a ton with your wire. And then just rip your wire through there pretty quick. Tie off your wire. All sorts of material on my nose today. Junk scissors, cut your wire. And don't forget that you have a little bit of excess that you didn't use. Clip that out too. Peel that all back. Looks pretty good. I used to, when I first did this pattern, I put rubber legs in the front and the back. And it just didn't seem to work how I wanted it to with those hackle stems running laterally. The rubber legs and the hackle stems couldn't quite get on the same page as to which one wanted to be in control. And they'd wind up being all over one another and just making a mess out of the fly, so I just took the rubber legs off altogether and just kept them on the front. So I had a little bit too much going on with this fly when I first came up with it. Still no, not yet. And then before we go putting on the head, we're just going to take one last plume of marabou. This one's all twisted around. I'm sure it's going to cooperate just fine when we go to palmer it. Alright, these rubber legs are going to be all over the place. going to be a little tricky to work around. I should have stole the straw from the back half and threw it on there, but we'll be able to manage. It's not going to let me do the rotary because those legs are going to fight me the whole way. Should have stole the straw. Tie this off right behind our eyes. And trim. At this point we can go ahead and cut our legs. Get those out of the way. And then same as the other 3 plumes, you just kind of peel it back a little bit, work your thread back over top of it, and you're set. We got a ton of bulk here. This fly pushes a lot of water. Has good motion to it. Now I am going to throw my straw on here just to keep it out of the way. It's not like we're working with deer hair or anything like that. For the head, we're just going to use this Sanyo's laser dub. And we're going to throw this on there. I'm going to grab a couple stacks of it. But it is just a little bit easier having that straw on there. Keeps material out of the way, keeps material from getting trapped. There's a top stack. Before you peel it back, throw your bottom on. There's that. Now what I do with this section right here is a little bit different. I do it more so when I'm working with like sculpin wool, but I started doing it with this just because it seems to cover up. It makes the head a little bulkier, and you have less of a tendency to have open spaces throughout it. And all I'm doing is I'm just grabbing a good clump of this and I'm working my finger in through here. See how it kind of opens up? You'll be able to see it a lot better when I'm working with sculpin wool. But I just throw this right over top of the eyes and everything, and then I tie right behind my eyes. 2 wraps, I'm set. Work everything back over. 1, 2, advance to the front. And you can see it has a nice, well-rounded, there's no gaps or anything. There's no openings at all. And that step right there is something that I've started incorporating a lot, even when I'm working with this laser dub. Now for the top in this front, I pick a pretty good sized chunk of dub. Even for the bottom, which I typically leave a little more sparse, I'm gonna run that through the comb real quick. I like them just a little bit thicker in the front than I do in the back, and that wants to rotate on me. 1 second here. Good. Pull all of this back. We're ready to finish. Ran away from me. Grab your black marker, touch this up just a little bit. I don't trim these very much. You can trim it if you want, if If you think that's too much bulk for the head, you can go ahead and trim it. What I do is I just take the brush, come right through here, and it just kind of blends everything in real nice. You don't have to overbrush these, just enough to where everything kind of flows in the one direction. It just kind of makes the fly look a little better when you take some time to brush these. It blends everything in. Doesn't leave you with a bunch of open gaps. And we can peel our straw off of here. Get our legs where we want them. And you can see that this fly has a ton of bulk. There's a lot of water that gets pushed by this fly. I like this in dirty water especially. I'll run it in just about any type of water, but especially dirty water. For some reason it pushes a ton of water. It just gets their attention a little bit more, and I've had some really good fish eat this fly. I'll have, as always, the material list at the end of this, contact information, whatever you may need. If there's any questions or comments, just leave them and I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you on the next fly.